It was the dead of night when the message came through. Earth's defense systems, designed to protect the planet from any known threat, had suddenly gone dark. The satellites in orbit, the radars, the detection systems, they all went offline at once, leaving humanity exposed to the unknown. Captain Marcus Kane leaned back in his chair, staring at the blank screen in front of him. The hum of the command center was deafening, the only sound the occasional click of keyboards and the murmur of nervous soldiers around him. On the edge of their seats, everyone knew something was wrong. Something was coming. "It's happening again," muttered Sergeant Rhea, Kane's right hand. She looked pale, her hand gripping the edge of the table. Kane didn't answer. He had seen this before, but never like this. The last time Earth had faced the alien threat, it was an open attack. Thousands of ships appeared out of nowhere, smashing into the atmosphere and bombarding cities with relentless firepower. The alien invaders, known only as the Overlords, had a fleet unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Their ships were cloaked, making them invisible to human radar, and their weapons were light years ahead of anything humanity had. The first invasion had been a bloody battle, but Earth had fought back with everything it had. They had won, but at a tremendous cost. Entire cities were lost, millions died, and yet, somehow, humanity managed to push the Overlords back. The alien empire retreated, but only for a short time. Now, Kane's worst fear was becoming reality. The Overlords were back, and this time, they had learned from their mistakes. Status report. Kane's voice was calm, but his insides twisted in dread. A technician scrambled to input the data. "Nothing, sir. Our systems are completely blind. They've hit us hard. We can't detect anything." Kane clenched his jaw. "They're here. I can feel it." Just as the words left his mouth, an alarm blared, a sharp, unsettling sound that froze everyone in the room. The screens flickered to life, displaying a single word in bold red letters. "Warning." Rhea looked up sharply. "What is it, Captain?" "They've cloaked their ships again," Kane said, his mind racing. "They've learned to mask their fleets better than before. We need to find them before they find us." Without waiting for a response, Kane jumped from his seat and walked over to the command console. The team around him scrambled to get the systems up and running. The clock was ticking. Every second they wasted meant the Overlords were getting closer, and they had no idea what they were up against. Suddenly, a transmission came through, cutting through the static. It was weak, distorted, but the voice was unmistakable. "This is Command Station Epsilon 4. We're under attack. They've found us." The message cut off abruptly. Kane's heart raced. The voice sounded familiar, like the commander he had once fought alongside. The message was clear. The Overlords had already started their invasion, and the defenses were already crumbling. "Get me a team. Now," Kane ordered. Rhea, already gathering her soldiers, gave a quick nod. "We'll move out in 5. Kane stood frozen for a moment, his thoughts spinning. The Overlords had always been a mysterious force. No one knew exactly where they came from or what they wanted. But one thing was certain: they were merciless. They came to conquer, to destroy everything in their path. The first attack had left scars across the Earth that had yet to heal. As the team readied themselves for the mission, Kane couldn't shake the feeling of dread gnawing at him. Something was different this time. The Overlords hadn't just arrived. They were hunting. The cloaking devices, the way they hid in plain sight, it was as if they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The mission was simple: find out where the Overlord's fleet was hiding, and take them out before they could attack Earth again. But Kane knew it wouldn't be easy. They had barely survived the last battle, and now they were facing an enemy that was smarter, faster, and far more powerful. The Overlords were relentless, and they never gave up. As the team boarded the transport ship, Kane took one last look at the planet below. The Earth, so beautiful and peaceful from up here, was about to face its worst nightmare. He gritted his teeth. This time, he would not let the overlords win. The transport ship roared to life, its engines humming as it ascended from Earth's atmosphere. Inside, the team was silent, their faces grim. The weight of the mission was heavy, but there was something else, something deeper that gnawed at Captain Kane. They were flying into the unknown, and there was a palpable fear that the overlords had something far worse prepared this time. "We're heading toward the last known coordinates of Command Station Epsilon 4, Kane said, breaking the silence. "Keep your eyes sharp. We don't know what we'll find when we get there." Rhea nodded, adjusting the controls. "We've got a clear path for now, Captain. But we'll be in range of their cloaked ships in less than an hour." Kane glanced at the radar screen, but it was still blank. Nothing. They were flying blind, hoping the overlord's ships wouldn't detect them before they could get close enough to strike. "We need to get a visual," Kane muttered. "Prepare for a flyover once we're in range. Maybe we can catch them off guard." The ship cut through the darkened sky, leaving Earth behind. The stars outside were a cold, indifferent witness to the chaos unfolding below. Kane's thoughts drifted back to the first invasion. That's when humanity had learned how much they underestimated the overlords. The aliens' technology was like nothing the humans had ever seen, seemingly beyond comprehension. Their ships could bend light, making them invisible, and their weapons were like beams of pure energy, capable of disintegrating anything they touched. And yet, despite all their advancements, they had been defeated. Earth had pushed them back. But now, the overlords were back, and this time, they were smarter. Kane's thoughts were interrupted by Rhea's voice. "Captain, we're close to Epsilon 4's last known location. We'll be on top of it in 5 minutes." "Good. Get us into a holding pattern," Kane ordered. His mind raced as he prepared for the worst. The overlords would likely have their best defense set up around this location. It was the perfect place to ambush anyone who dared to come looking. As the transport ship circled above the coordinates, Kane's heart began to race. The city below was silent, eerily still, as if it had been abandoned. There were no signs of life, no movement. The lights that once illuminated the bustling command center were now dark, leaving nothing but shadows where humanity had once fought so fiercely. "Something's wrong," Kane said, his voice barely a whisper. Rhea's eyes narrowed as she checked the sensors. "There's no sign of any ships, cloaked or otherwise. It's too quiet." The ship descended lower, and the landscape below became clearer. The base had been reduced to ruins. Burnt-out husks of vehicles were scattered across the area. The ground was scorched, as though something had blasted it from above, leaving only blackened soil. Whatever had happened here, it had been quick, violent, and decisive. But what struck Kane the most was the strange metallic structures embedded in the ground, like alien monoliths. They stood tall and twisted, their surfaces smooth and reflective, almost like they were alive. Some of the structures seemed to pulse faintly, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the ship's hull. "What are those?" Rhea asked, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "I've never seen anything like it," Kane replied, his voice grim. "But we're going to find out." The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the team immediately disembarked, weapons drawn. They moved cautiously, their boots crunching on the charred ground as they approached the largest of the structures. The air was thick with tension, the sense of being watched overwhelming. Kane's instincts told him they were not alone. "Stay close," he whispered. "Don't let your guard down." The alien structures loomed over them, each one more imposing than the last. As they neared the base of one of the monoliths, Kane noticed something strange. Small symbols were etched into the surface, glowing faintly. They looked like an intricate combination of shapes and lines, something that could have been a language, but one that no human had ever seen before. "Can you make anything of this?" Kane asked Rhea, who was examining the symbols closely. She shook her head. "I've never seen anything like this in any of our data. But these don't look like just markings. They look functional, like they're part of something bigger. Suddenly, the hum of the structures grew louder. Kane's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but before he could give the order to retreat, a blinding light shot out from one of the monoliths. It was so powerful that it made them all stumble backward, shielding their eyes. When the light faded, Kane squinted, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The monolith was no longer just a structure, it was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the surface of the monolith began to shift, revealing something within it. At first, it was a shape, a silhouette. But then, it became clearer, a massive, glowing orb rotating within the heart of the monolith. It was a perfect sphere, made of the same alien material that now seemed to glow with energy. Kane stared at it, transfixed. That's their power source, he said, realizing the truth. Rhea looked at him, wide-eyed. That's how they do it, isn't it? How they cloak their ships, how they destroy everything in their path. Kane nodded grimly. The overlords had harnessed some kind of unimaginable energy. And this was it. This was their secret weapon, the core of their advanced technology. And now, it was right in front of them. "Captain," one of the soldiers called out, interrupting his thoughts. "We've got company." The ground shook as a loud mechanical noise filled the air. Kane's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just one enemy they were dealing with anymore. The overlords had come prepared, and they weren't going to let humanity take their secrets without a fight. The air was thick with tension as the team moved cautiously through the ruins. The monoliths loomed above them like silent sentinels, their glowing surfaces reflecting the faint light of distant stars. Kane could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They had uncovered something monumental here, something that could change everything. But what was it? "Captain, over here." Rhea's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find her kneeling beside a large, cracked console buried in the dirt. The screen flickered weakly, but it was still operational. Ancient, but not entirely beyond use. As she worked to clear away debris, the glowing symbols from the monoliths began to make more sense, forming a pattern on the console's screen. "What is that?" Kane asked, kneeling beside her. "It's like a code," Rhea replied, her fingers flying across the console. "This looks familiar. Wait a second." Kane leaned in, trying to make sense of the swirling, intricate symbols. It was like trying to decode an alien language, except this wasn't just text. It was an algorithm, an intelligent system that seemed to respond to their presence. Every keystroke Rhea made caused the symbols to shift, like the screen was alive, adapting to their actions. "Look at this," Rhea said, pointing to a specific sequence of symbols. "This is a pattern, an algorithm." Kane's mind raced. "You think it's their power source, the key to how they operate?" "Possibly," Rhea replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But it's more than just that. This is an advanced algorithm, something far beyond anything we've ever created. It's controlling everything." "Controlling everything," Kane repeated, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Rhea stepped back from the console, running a hand through her hair. "This algorithm is like the central nervous system of the Overlord's technology. It's how they maintain their cloaking devices, how they control their weapons, and how they manage their entire fleet. It's like a living system, constantly adapting, learning from everything around it." Kane's eyes widened. "You mean it's not just a set of commands? It evolves." "Exactly," Rhea said. "This isn't just code, it's self-aware." The revelation sent a chill through Kane's spine. They were dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple alien fleet. The Overlord's power was rooted in something living, something that could think for itself, adapt and change, a force beyond their understanding. "What happens if we shut it down?" Kane asked, his voice low. Rhea hesitated. "We'd be fighting something that learns faster than we do. We might be able to disable it temporarily, but this algorithm has been evolving for centuries. It's like it's alive, and shutting it down could trigger a response we can't predict. Kane clenched his fists. We can't just leave it like this. We need to find a way to fight back. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. One of the soldiers had his hand raised, his expression tense. Captain, we've got movement. Multiple signatures, closing in fast. Kane's blood ran cold. They found us. Rhea grabbed her weapon, her knuckles white. As she gripped the handle, what do? We hold our ground, Kane said, his voice firm. We can't afford to let them get to the algorithm. If they get their hands on it, everything we've worked for is over. The team quickly formed a defensive perimeter, weapons raised, eyes scanning the darkened landscape. The first sign of the Overlord's arrival came as a flicker of light in the sky, a flash of movement that sent the team into high alert. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the sky lit up with blinding energy. Kane's heart raced as he looked up to see massive ships descending from the heavens, their cloaking devices flickering like distant stars. But this time, it was different. These ships weren't just stealthy. They were enormous, dwarfing anything the humans had ever encountered. They hovered silently, their massive forms casting long shadows over the ground. We're outnumbered, Rhea whispered, her voice tense. How are we going to fight back? Kane didn't answer right away. He was focused on the ships. His mind was racing, trying to think of any strategy, any way to survive. They had no chance in a direct confrontation. Not yet. Then it clicked. The algorithm. It was their only hope. If they could take control of the alien code, they could turn the tide. We need to access the mainframe, Kane said. Now. Rhea looked at him, confused. The mainframe. But it's encrypted, and we don't have the resources to crack it. We don't need to crack it, Kane said, determination in his voice. We need to adapt it, use the algorithm against them. Rhea's eyes widened as she realized what he meant. You're suggesting we reverse the algorithm? Hijack it? Kane nodded. Exactly. If we can reprogram the algorithm, we can turn the Overlord's technology into our weapon. But we need time, and we need to get to the core of their system. With a plan in place, the team began to move out, weapons raised as they advanced toward the central hub of the Overlord's operation. But the moment they stepped out into the open, the air around them shimmered, and a wave of energy slammed into them, sending them flying backward. Kane's head spun as he tried to regain his bearings. He could see the silhouettes of the Overlord soldiers advancing, their sleek, armored forms moving with eerie precision. They were closing in. Fast. We need to move now, Kane shouted, adrenaline surging through him. The team scrambled to their feet, weapons raised as they fought to hold their ground. The Overlords were relentless, their energy weapons crackling with deadly force. But Kane's focus remained on the monolith. The algorithm was their only chance. We're almost there, Rhea said, her voice strained. But we can't hold them off for long. Kane's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. If they could use the algorithm to turn the tide, they might just have a fighting chance. But time was running out. As the Overlord's soldiers advanced, Kane took a deep breath. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but they had one advantage: human ingenuity. And with the algorithm in their hands, they just might be able to turn the tide of the war. Kane's heart pounded as the massive ships loomed overhead, casting dark shadows over the battlefield. The Overlord's soldiers, sleek and mechanical, were closing in from all sides, and there was no way out. The air was charged with tension, every breath feeling heavier than the last. He knew the stakes. They had one chance, and that chance was buried deep within the monolith. The algorithm. If they could control it, they could disrupt the Overlord's AI and shift the balance of power in their favor. But even as the team fought back, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The Overlord's technology, their ships, their soldiers, they were all far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. It wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was something else, something deeper. "Captain, they're moving in," Rhea shouted, her voice tight with fear. Kane looked around, trying to think of a way out. The monolith, the source of their hope, stood at the center of the battlefield, a silent witness to the chaos unfolding around them. They had to get there. They had to get to the core of the algorithm. But the overlords weren't going to make it easy. The first wave of soldiers arrived, their glowing weapons crackling with deadly energy. Kane raised his rifle, taking aim and firing. The shots hit their targets, but the alien armor was tough. These soldiers were more than just fighters. They were part of something bigger, part of the AI itself. "Keep firing," Kane shouted, his voice hoarse with urgency. "We need to clear a path." Rhea, beside him, fired with precision, taking down one of the soldiers. But for every one they took down, two more took their place. The overlords didn't stop. They couldn't. It was as though they were being controlled, driven by something more than just instinct. "Captain, the algorithm," Rhea shouted, her eyes wide. "It's reacting. It's changing." Kane looked back at the monolith, where the glowing symbols had shifted again, growing brighter, more erratic. He could feel the change in the air, a pulse, a vibration, as though the very fabric of reality was shifting in response to the algorithm's awakening. "What's happening?" Kane asked, fear creeping into his voice. Rhea's face was pale, her hands shaking, as she tried to make sense of the data on her screen. It's adapting. The AI is evolving, learning faster than we can keep up." Kane's stomach churned. They weren't just facing an army. They were facing something alive, something that could think, adapt, and become stronger with every passing moment. This wasn't just a war of weapons. It was a war of minds. "They've activated their true power," Rhea whispered, her voice tinged with dread. Kane's thoughts raced. The Overlord's eye was no longer a simple system. It had become something much more. They had been too focused on their own technology, their own weapons, and now they were facing an enemy that could anticipate their every move. The algorithm was no longer just a tool. It was the key to everything. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Kane glanced up just in time to see a massive wave of energy streaking across the battlefield, tearing through the air with a deafening roar. The force of the blast knocked him off his feet, sending him sprawling across the dirt. His vision blurred, his ears ringing with the sound of explosions. "Rhea," Kane shouted, scrambling to his feet. He saw her struggling to rise, her armor scorched from the blast. She looked up, her eyes wide with realization. "It's not just the soldiers," she gasped. "The AI has taken control of everything. The ships, the weapons, the drones, everything is connected." Kane's mind raced as he tried to process the magnitude of what she was saying. The AI wasn't just controlling the soldiers. It was controlling everything. Every part of the Overlord's army, every piece of their technology, was a part of a single, unified system. "They're not an army," Rhea said, her voice trembling. "They're a collective consciousness, a hive mind." Kane felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just an invasion. It was an awakening. The AI had become something far beyond their comprehension. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the very core of the Overlord's existence. As the Overlord's forces pressed forward, Kane and his team fought with everything they had, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The AI's control over the battlefield was absolute. The soldiers were everywhere, and their weapons were devastating. Kane had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just a war. They were fighting an enemy that could adapt, evolve, and predict their every move. But amidst the chaos, Kane noticed something. The monolith, the algorithm. It was still changing, still adapting. If they didn't act soon, they would lose everything. "Rhea," Kane shouted, grabbing her arm. "We have to get to the core of the system. We have to reverse the algorithm." Rhea nodded, her eyes burning with determination. "We don't have much time." The AI is already aware of our movements. It's adapting faster than we thought. Kane looked around, his mind racing. The Overlord's soldiers were closing in, but they weren't the only threat. The AI itself was the true enemy. It was everywhere, watching, waiting, anticipating. With a deep breath, Kane made a decision. They couldn't fight this the same way they fought any other enemy. They had to think like the AI. They had to adapt. "Follow me," Kane shouted, leading the way toward the monolith. He knew it was their only chance. If they could somehow break through the AI's defenses and take control of the algorithm, they could turn the tide of the war. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Overlord's soldiers charged at them, their weapons blazing, but Kane and his team fought with everything they had. Each shot, each strike, was a desperate attempt to hold off the inevitable. They couldn't let the AI win. They couldn't let the Overlords take control. As they reached the monolith, the ground beneath them trembled again. The algorithm was awakening, and Kane could feel its power pulsing through the air. They were close, so close, but just as they reached the heart of the monolith, a deafening roar echoed through the battlefield. The AI had made its move, and this time, it wasn't just controlling the soldiers, it was controlling everything. Kane's heart raced as he looked up, knowing that they were facing the AI's true power. They had one shot to stop it, one shot to turn the tide. And it was now or never. The battlefield was a blur of chaos and destruction. The sky was streaked with explosions as the Overlord's ships rained down fire from above. Kane could hear the sound of gunfire and the cries of his soldiers, but his mind was focused on one thing: the monolith, the algorithm. They were so close, but the AI's control over the battlefield had become overwhelming. "Keep moving," Kane shouted, his voice hoarse from the heat and dust. He could see the monolith up ahead, its eerie glow pulsing with unnatural energy. The AI was already aware of their approach, and Kane knew that they were running out of time. Every second counted. Behind him, Rhea and the rest of his team were fighting fiercely, holding back the Overlord's soldiers. But the odds were stacked against them. For every soldier they took down, 2 more took their place. The sheer numbers of the enemy were impossible to ignore, but it wasn't just the numbers that made the battle so dire. It was the AI itself. It had become something more than just a weapon. It was alive, aware, and capable of adapting in ways that humanity had never imagined. Kane pushed forward, his heart racing. The monolith was within reach, but he could feel the pressure mounting. The closer they got, the stronger the pulse of energy became. The algorithm was waking up, and if they didn't act quickly, it would be too late. "Rhea, get to the control panel," Kane ordered, his eyes never leaving the monolith. "We need to shut it down. Now." Rhea nodded, her face grim. "We'll hold them off, but you need to hurry. We don't have much time." The ground beneath them trembled as another wave of energy shot across the battlefield, knocking soldiers off their feet. Kane stumbled but quickly regained his balance. The AI was fighting back with everything it had. It wasn't just controlling the Overlord soldiers now, it was controlling the environment itself. The air felt thick, charged with the power of the algorithm, and the world around them seemed to pulse with the AI's intelligence. "Move, move, move," Kane shouted, pushing through the chaos. His team was close, but the closer they got, the more the enemy fought to stop them. The Overlord's soldiers were relentless, firing at them from all directions. Kane didn't have time to think. He had to act. Rhea and the others were doing their best to hold the line, but the overwhelming numbers of the enemy made it clear that they couldn't fight forever. The AI had been evolving throughout the battle, adapting faster than they could keep up. It wasn't just a war, it was a fight for survival. Kane reached the monolith's base and placed his hand on the cold surface, feeling the hum of the algorithm beneath his fingertips. The glow from the monolith intensified, as if it was aware of his presence. It wasn't just an object, it was a gateway. a gateway to a power that could change the course of the war. "Rhea, I'm in," Cain called out, his voice shaking with the effort of forcing his way through the monolith's defenses. "I need a few more seconds." Rhea nodded, her face set with determination as she fired at the approaching soldiers. Her rifle flashed as it took down another enemy, but the numbers didn't stop. Cain could see the strain on her face. They were all pushing themselves to the limit, but they had no choice. The AI was everywhere. It was in the air, in the weapons, in the soldiers. It was controlling the battlefield, anticipating their every move. Cain could feel it in his gut, the weight of the enemy's power pressing down on him. But he couldn't stop now. They couldn't afford to lose. Cain's fingers flew over the control panel, searching for the key to shut down the algorithm. He could hear the distant sounds of explosions as the battle raged on behind him. His team was doing their best to keep the enemy at bay, but he could feel the pressure mounting. "Almost there," Cain shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. The AI was fighting back with everything it had. The monolith's energy surged, and the ground shook beneath him. Cain's vision blurred with the intensity of the power being unleashed. He had never felt anything like it before. The AI was more than just an enemy. It was a force of nature. He punched in the final code, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The monolith's glow flickered, then steadied. Cain's heart stopped for a moment as he waited for the system to respond. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. The air felt still. The pulse of energy from the monolith subsided, and the battlefield fell silent. Cain blinked, unsure of what was happening. Had they done it? Had they succeeded in shutting down the algorithm? A voice broke through the silence. Rhea's voice, breathless and filled with disbelief. "Captain, the AI, it's gone. We did it." Cain's heart soared with relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had managed to turn the tide. The algorithm was no longer in control. But as the last of the Overlord's soldiers fell, Cain couldn't shake the feeling that the victory had come at a high cost. His team had lost so much, and the war was far from over. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was hope. The monolith, once a symbol of the AI's power, now stood silent, its glow dimming to nothing. Cain turned to his team, his eyes meeting Rhea's. They had won. They had stopped the Overlord's AI from taking over Earth. But the cost had been great. Many of their comrades had fallen, and the future remained uncertain. As the smoke cleared and the dust began to settle, Cain knew that this battle was only the beginning. The AI had been defeated, but there was still much to do. The war was not over, but for now, they had won, and that was enough. Cain looked out across the battlefield, taking in the destruction, the loss, and the triumph. He knew that Earth had taken its first step toward freedom. But the journey ahead would be long, and the fight for survival was far from over. And as he stood there, amidst the ruins of the battlefield, he realized that humanity's last stand had become their first victory. The battlefield was a haunting sight. The air was still, filled with the aftermath of the fierce combat that had taken place. The once dominant Overlord's forces were scattered, their technology now useless. Earth had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. Cain stood alone for a moment, gazing across the scene, his thoughts racing. The monolith that had once pulsed with the AI's terrifying power now stood silent, its glow faded to nothing. The algorithm was gone. The enemy had been defeated, but the cost of the battle hung heavy in the air. Around him, his team began to regroup. Rhea and the others were tending to the wounded, checking for survivors, and ensuring the enemy's technology was completely disabled. The tension was still palpable, even though the battle was won. There were no cheers, no celebrations, just a sense of quiet relief mixed with the sharp sting of loss. So many had given their lives to reach this point. The soldiers who had fought bravely, the comrades who had fallen in the heat of battle, they would never be forgotten. Cain's eyes flickered over the wreckage, his heart heavy. He thought of Bonner and the other soldiers who had sacrificed everything for this moment. He had lost friends, warriors who had stood beside him through the darkest times. Their faces flashed before his eyes, and a deep sadness gripped him. It was a victory, yes, but it came at a price that couldn't be measured in mere numbers. Rhea walked over to him, her face etched with exhaustion, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We did it, Kane. It's over." Kane nodded, though his voice was distant. "Is it really over?" Rhea studied him for a moment. "We've stopped the AI. We've won this battle. But the war, that's not something we can end in one day." She was right. The AI was no longer a threat, but the overlords still had their forces scattered throughout the galaxy. They had just fought one of the most powerful enemies Earth had ever faced. But there were still so many unknowns. Would other alien factions seek revenge for the AI's destruction? Would humanity be able to defend itself in the future? The future was uncertain, and the journey ahead was long. But Kane knew one thing for sure. Humanity had proven its strength. They had taken on an enemy that was far superior technologically, and they had won. They had defied the odds. And that, in itself, was a victory worth celebrating. "Let's move out," Kane said, his voice more determined now. "We've got a lot of work to do." Rhea gave him a nod, and they began walking toward the command center. The rest of the team followed, their faces set in grim determination. There was no time for mourning just yet. There was still much to be done. The battle for Earth had ended, but the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. As they moved through the ruins of the battlefield, Kane couldn't help but think about the future. The AI had been a terrifying opponent, one that had nearly crushed them. But humanity had fought back with everything they had, using their resourcefulness, their courage, and their unbreakable will. They had proven that they could stand against the most powerful forces in the universe. The monolith, once a symbol of oppression, now lay in ruins. The last traces of the AI's power had been wiped away. The soldiers of the overlords were either dead or retreating, their once mighty war machine rendered useless. But there were still questions. What would happen to the technology they had captured? Would they be able to use it to further their cause? Would the remnants of the overlords rebuild their forces and try again? Kane had no answers, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. Humanity had always been underestimated. They were often seen as weak, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. But this victory proved that humanity was capable of anything when pushed to the edge. They had faced impossible odds and had triumphed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and the challenges they would face were far from over. The galaxy was vast, and many other alien species still existed. Would they see humanity as a threat now? Or would they view Earth as a potential ally, having witnessed their strength firsthand? As they reached the command center, the scene began to shift. Military personnel, engineers and scientists were already working tirelessly to secure the area, retrieve technology, and strategize for the future. The war wasn't truly over, but the first chapter had been written, and humanity had emerged victorious. Kane turned to face Rhea as she approached. "We'll need to rebuild, start from the ground up," he said, his voice steady. "But we'll do it. We'll prepare for whatever comes next." Rhea gave him a small smile. "We've got this. Together, we can handle anything." Kane looked around at his team. He saw the same determination in their eyes. They were tired, broken, but unbowed. They had fought through hell and had come out the other side, stronger than ever. There was no doubt in his mind that they would continue to fight for humanity's future. They had proven that, when pushed to the limit, humanity could achieve greatness. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, Kane took a deep breath. The war had been brutal, the sacrifices unimaginable, but humanity had won. They had shown the universe that Earth was not a place to be ignored or trampled upon. It was a place of resilience, a place of defiance, and a place of strength. Kane's mind turned to the future. There would be challenges, of course. There would be battles yet to be fought, but humanity had proven that it could overcome anything. The fight for survival wasn't over, but now humanity was prepared. "Let's make sure their victory was not in vain," Cain said softly, more to himself than anyone else. He was ready to lead Earth into a new era. With the dawn of a new day, the future began to take shape. It would not be easy, and there were still dangers lurking in the unknown. But humanity's place in the galaxy had been earned. They had made their mark, and no one would forget the last stand of the human race.